Someone had taken the battery out because it ticks that way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that drove.
And
I've done that.
you never notice it, but in the dark at night time.
Yeah, and stuff, or unplugged it or whatever.
It ticks really loud.
I find it difficult enough to sleep in hotels.
Don't start screaming. The mic, when the spirit gets renewed. I think.
Welcome everybody. The Circular Council acknowledges the Northwest Tasmanian Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of the country on which we stand, meet and play. We recognise their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. We pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. I welcome you all and give advice that the council meeting will be digitally recorded as per policy. This is to assist in the preparation of minutes and to allow for live streaming of the council meetings. A reminder to those in attendance to ensure their mobile phones are switched to silent throughout the meeting. I'd ask to be upstanding for prayers.
We pray to you, who are Mother, Father to us all, for wisdom and clarity in discussion and debate. We ask that your light shines in our hearts and illuminates the decisions made here tonight on behalf of the community. You who are one, although known by many names and whose truths are expressed in many faiths.
Thank you. Councillor Popovsky, I understand, quite happy for you to remain in your seat as the meeting goes on.
Thanks, it's the week of the age.
And I won't even make any snide remarks, I promise. Attendance, we have a leave of absence, no apologies, and we have a leave of absence from Councillor Hine. The confirmation of minutes, so if we could have a move at the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the Thursday, the 17th of August, be confirmed. Moved by Councillor Collins, seconded by Councillor Dabner. No debate. I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Now, declarations of interest.
I won't be voting on the Ego cabins because I've had business dealings with them.
That's 6.2. 6.2. Thanks, Councillor Pilkington. Any others? Thank you. Now, 4.1, Mayor's Communications. Any query on the bits and pieces? Or questions coming out of those?
I just got to find it.
We have a conversation with Sergeant Walters about the going around town. Is there anything come from that?
Yeah, it was a standard. It wasn't specifically about what's been happening, but it was a standard 6-weekly catch-up. And obviously we did have a chat about that.
Yeah, thanks.
I know Sergeant Walters, without naming any names, of course, there was some charges laid and some investigations ongoing. Was basic information on that little area, yes. Councillor Flowers?
28th the 8th, the project Far Northwest update. What's that about?
Yes, Luke Saar met with myself, the General Manager, and Clint Walker came into that one. And it was basically in relation to where the Dismal Swamp, the funding from the federal government for Dismal Swamp was, and how they was working on getting out of the state coffers, which should happen October-ish. It's imminent, and working alongside that was the regulatory changes to allow for a longer-term lease to attract an investor.
Yep, no worries.
So that was the only subject we discussed at that meeting.
Yep.
Councillor Oldacre?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question to you is, what was your take on the Senate inquiry into bank closures?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Councillor. I might pass to the General Manager. The General Manager we had a good hearing. We had got a good listening to, but the General Manager across all the details a lot better than me.
We were afforded plenty of time to make our case, and Georgetown Council was also present online. Well, actually, they were present in person, and they raised some very similar issues about areas of lacking digital connectivity, lacking digital literacy, which we also spoke to, and in our case we added the lack of public transport, the fact that a municipality of over 8,000 people now has to travel 50 minutes to get to an actual bank branch. We did say that the community had come together to organise 2 ATMs, but we said, and the post office had stepped up, but there's a limit to what they can do. We raised the point that in Tasmania you still have to attend a bank branch on the final day of a house settlement, and you know that's already a logistically complex day, but now we've got to go an hour to, or possibly longer if your bank branch is in Burnie and not Wynyard. So all of that was very well received. They did ask, they said the banks had told them that they had consulted prior to closing branches, and the Mayor and I politely rebutted that, and I personally thought that was quite outrageous of the banks to say that. I think those were the key points.
Yep. As an adjunct to that, I've had interviews with ABC, quite a long one today with the Financial Review actually, in relation to the regional stuff. So there's an interest out there, and it now depends on what comes out of the inquiry. But I concur with the GM, all indications were we were being listened to anyway. Whether what happens from there, we'll see.
Thank you.
Okay, no more? Thank you. There's also the notification of council workshops there. Is there any quick questions? Then we'll put all those in one motion. Yeah, could I have a mover and seconder that they be noted, please? Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Seconded by Councillor Pilkington. No debate. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. 5. Now, I'll make that a little bit bigger. The Council encourages community participation at its meetings through the opportunity for public questions and statements consistent with the Council's core values. Councillors and staff strive to ensure people are treated with courtesy, fairness, dignity and respect. We expect our residents and ratepayers to apply the same standing in dealing with councillors. As Mayor, it is my responsibility to maintain the orderly conduct of council meetings and determine whether a question or statement is out of order due to the use of offensive, objectionable or defamatory expressions. I ask members of the public to show proper consideration and courtesy in these comments. Tonight I intend to give everybody the opportunity to ask 2 questions or make a statement if they wish. If there's time after that, we may allow for extra questions. So if anyone has a question, please come to the lectern and state your name, please, and ask.
Hello, my name's Melissa Wells. I just have a couple of questions. So my first one is, with the recent article in the Chronicle and the Facebook post in regards to the ambulance and lack thereof, is the council able to advocate for more mental health services for the community? I myself accessed the 10 free sessions some time ago and was making some progress, slow but progress. But now I'm unable to get any other mental health support at all, and I feel like that it's more detrimental to my mental health to have got that initial 10 sessions and then now not being able to access anything else. So I think something like that is a huge concern in the community.
Yep.
And to go on with that, I'm also aware, due to some incidents in the community over the past few months, that we are one police officer down. We actually one officer down like what we're actually allocated. And I noticed last week that Burnie, I think they received like 20 new officers, or the Northwest Coast. I have been speaking with the acting Northwest commander in regards to it. But I haven't seemed to be able to get anywhere. So I was just wondering, as a council, would you be able to advocate for that? I've also contacted Minister Ellis and I haven't received a reply.
Melissa, yeah, look, the first one, whilst we haven't specifically been advocating for mental health, we can add that to the suite of stuff. You'd have seen, as you mentioned, we've been advocating for better services, especially in the ambulance area, so we can add that to the suite of the advocacy we do there without a problem. The second part, yes, we've been aware through my meetings with Sergeant Walters for considerable time that there have been one staff member down, creating pressures across the board. I actually asked the question of Sergeant Walters about the new group. Now, they've all been allocated, but there are issues of putting brand new police officers into a country area as well. So, obviously she is, and we'll do what we can, but it's a little bit of just need the extra proper bodies to be able to build that up. But certainly we'll advocate for that, yes.
So then I have another question. In my dealings with Minister Gents and Minister Ellis's secretary, are the council aware that the Liberal officers in Smithton are unable to be used at the moment? I actually have a meeting with Minister Gents, and it's this coming, not tomorrow, the next Friday, and I've been asked to meet him in Sadie's Takeaway Cafe because they're unable to use the Liberal officers due to occupational health and safety, I think was the reason that Judith, his secretary, gave me.
I don't believe so, Melissa, but we'll take it on notice, but I don't think that's anything to do with us at all.
I just thought we have an issue trying to access them ministers in our community as it is, so if the office isn't open, and like you can see now, you can't go in there and even speak to the secretary. A few months ago, it was open 3 days a week, but now, like, we don't even have it open 3 days a week. I think that's absolutely disgraceful for a remote rural community like ours.
Yep. General Manager?
Through you, we can contact the office and see if we can offer them a room and council. If we have one free when they need it, that might be a way forward, but yes.
Yeah, well, I just feel that some of the things that I want to discuss with the Minister next Friday are not the type of discussion you should be having in a takeaway shop.
Yep,
Yeah.
I get that, yep.
We'll take it on notice and see what we can do.
Yep, and can I slip in my last question?
Yeah, go.
My next one is, with the recent incidents relating to the youth in the community, they've copped a little bit of a bad rap, and I'm not speaking about any youth in particular, I just know in general from like my upbringing in this community that there's not much for them to do. They're bored out of their tiny little minds. Is there any way that we can look into having the youth centre open 5 days a week? And is there any way of being able to facilitate some sort of weekend options, one weekend a month or something like that, where we could do something? I don't know, I've thought about fishing on the reclaim or going up to Bryant Park, someone who owns a buggy or something. Just something, anything for them to do, because...
Yep, I hear you. Take it on notice, because it's a pretty wide-ranging sort of question. We'll take it on notice and we'll talk to some of the staff about what might be possible and come back to you from there.
Well, I understand the youth centre's facilitated by 3 groups.
Yep.
So surely within them 3 groups there's something that...
Well, we don't know what their commitments are, so I can't give an answer as we sit here at the moment. So, yep.
All right, no worries. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Melissa. Any further questions? No? We will move on to... Sorry, there was a... No, there wasn't.
No, there wasn't.
Forget I spoke. Planning Authority. So we're now... I'll remind councillors that we are now sitting as a planning authority, and working under the regulations there. 6.2, I think it is. 6.1, the Main Road Stanley subdivision. I think George doing it? You doing this one, George?
You're on mute, George.
On mute. Can't hear you.
Apologies, I had the microphone on. Everyone can hear me?
Yes. Thanks, George.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. So the application for the subdivision is located at Main Road Stanley, which is a large parcel of land on the southern side of Main Road on the entry to the Stanley Village. It borders the golf course and the Stanley Recreation Ground on the southern sides, and it borders residential dwellings along Main Road to the north. The application is to subdivide that parcel into 71 lots with associated roads, footways, drainage and access infrastructure. The proposed subdivision is to be undertaken in 5 stages. In terms of the application, it's obviously got a little bit of history. So if I go through start and then briefly touch on where we finished, it will hopefully provide you with a bit of guidance as to how this has been processed and assessed. So the application itself has 4 main discretionary items. 2 of those, or 3 of those, relate to the zone provisions, being the general residential zone, the discretions for lot design being frontage width and lot sizes, sorry, not lot sizes, frontage width and also the construction of roads. And the other 2 discretions relate to subdivision within a priority vegetation area and subdivision within a flood-prone area. The assessments found that the application satisfies the performance criteria relating to the general residential zone and also to the priority vegetation area. The assessment is found based on the information that's been provided and also to a degree subsequent correspondence with the applicant that the proposed subdivision doesn't satisfy performance criteria C1271P1, which relates to subdivision within a flood-prone area. And the specifics to that are detailed within the recommendation, which is on page 15 of the agenda. The grounds of refusal were captured in the 3 items. The first one, we'll go to the first, the second and the third. Both of those particular grounds, the third ground relates to not being able to satisfy the performance criteria because the application has not adequately demonstrated that the subdivision will achieve a tolerable level of risk from flood. Now, the primary basis for that is that the modelling is showing that the adjoining land to the southwest will be subject to an increased risk of flood depths and also some flood velocity, and our infrastructure team has determined that isn't a tolerable level of risk. The refusal grounds 1 and 2 tie to this performance criteria, but also tie to a separate provision of the scheme which relates to complying or being consistent with the purpose of the flood-prone area code. In terms of the application process itself, once we had sufficient information for it to be valid and to progress to advertising, 21 representations were received. The concerns and the themes and the comments have been provided within the planning assessment. The themes broadly related to visual amenity of the proposed subdivision, lot sizes, scale, drainage, lot frontages, and flood hazard. So the majority of those were able to be addressed in a supportive way on the basis that most of them related to the provisions of the general residential zone, which was satisfied. Concerns raised around flooding and stormwater. It was identified based on the assessment provided by the scheme that those concerns were valid and had merit, and again they're reflected in the recommendation. Lastly, there has been, since the application was advertised, there's been a series of correspondence between the applicant and council, which eventually culminated in some legal advice that was sought on behalf of council to determine whether or not council could proceed with some of the information that was provided by the applicant through that process. The advice was that the design solution that was ultimately provided by the applicant, because it wasn't advertised and because there was a reasonable amount of public interest through the advertising period, that the application should be withdrawn and should be re-advertised with the design solution. And that another step to that as well was that because of the fact that the legal advice was that it needed to, or it should be re-advertised, it was council was unable to condition the design solution as part of the any recommendation for approval. So on that basis, a decision was made to progress the application to this meeting and present the recommendation of refusal. So just to conclude, of the 4 or 5 discretionary items, the assessment satisfied or determined that the application satisfied all of them, except for one, and that's the basis for the refusal, which relates to the increase in risk of flooding. So I shall, I'll hand it back to you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to answer some questions.
Thanks, George. Before we go to a motion, is there any questions on that to George?
Yeah, I've got a question, George. I hear you saying flood-prone area. Is there any measure of water that's come from external sources outside this subdivision? Has it been measured? Is that the cause of the flood, or is it the subdivision the cause of the flood?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Councillor Poposky. So it's a combination. It's a combination of factors. So the land itself is very low lying, as I'm sure everyone knows and understands that part of Stanley. So it's already subject to some flooding, and council does have studies to support that. So we know that it floods. The drainage forms part of the public stormwater system itself there, the open cut drain that's running there. So we know it's in a stormwater path, and we know that is subject to flooding. The second component is that the proposed subdivision will rely on constructing new roads and eventually new buildings, which would obviously have hard stand surfaces and roofs. And the subdivision itself, will create more concentrated runoff in periods of heavy rain events, which will also cause that water that's falling on that part of the site effectively entering into the public stormwater system at a faster rate than it currently does now, because at the moment it's effectively pervious surface paddock, and it makes its way into the drainage channel. With the roads and the roofs, it obviously quickens that process up, and the more quickly the stormwater enters into the public stormwater system, the greater impact it can have both downstream and then if it's not properly detained, upstream as well.
Second part of the question then, George, is I hear what you say about the concentration of water off roofs and that, but if this subdivision there was concerned that it may cause flood in the upstream area, wouldn't that be slowing the flow of water going down into the lower parts of Stanley and be a positive?
Yes, through Mr. Mayor. Yes, look, some of the modelling that has been done and part of the design solution that's been put forward by the applicant is that there would be a level of decrease in the volume and velocity of water downstream. So that could be viewed as being positive in that regard. If we look more broadly at the upstream component, in this instance, the upstream land which is affected by the flooding and which primarily forms the basis of refusal, that land is owned general residential. So we believe that the fact that it's got a right to be able to be built and developed for residential purposes, and therefore there's an inherent risk if we're increasing flooding on that land, which is forming this position. It may be potentially a different story if that was environmental managed land or recreational land or some other form of land that may be public that may never be developed and can withstand and hold additional flooding. But in this instance, we've got residential land, and part of what we're trying to do is prevent the risk of flooding on that land further, because it's plausible that could be developed for residential purposes.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Thanks, George. Okay, so we have a recommendation that the council refuses the application for a subdivision. We'll move it.
So moved.
Thanks, Councillor Oldacre. Seconder. Seconded by Councillor Dabnett. Thank you, Councillor Oldacre.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And can I also say thank you to George for the work that they've had to go through, and those within our own staff here have had to go through to get to where this result is. Fact is that it will create some flooding. You can put water tanks on every house. As soon as the water tank fills up, you've still got the water. And as much as we would all love to see a 71 house subdivision go ahead because of the shortage of housing in the place, the first thing that will happen if we get into the flooding, everybody that's already built there will then come to us saying, why are you letting this ground flood? Why didn't you do something about it? Well, we need a proper resolution as to how they're going to deal with it. It's not up for us to tell them how to do it. They've got to come with the resolution, as the engineers have told us. So that's the reason for the refusal. It's not that we don't want the subdivision, not at all. It's the fact that there's a flooding issue. There's been a flooding issue in that watercourse for a long time, and it's not just because you're building this. There's always been an issue down there behind the showgrounds, ever since I've been in Circular Head, and I've been here some 40 odd years. So that's the reason for the refusal, and I call on the council to support it.
Thanks, Councillor Oldacre. Councillor Dabnett.
I do, yeah, I do also feel compelled to abide by the planner's recommendation, and thank you, George, for all the work you're putting in, and staff, and the developer themselves. I know it's been a long process and a lot of back and forth. I think what we're seeing in Stanley is that it's obviously a great place to visit, it's a great place to live. That's been recognised through the fact that we've got new subdivisions wanting to be put there, which is a fantastic thing. And we need new ratepayers and new residents. We need them. I think anything we can do to actually assist with the development of these sites, we should be doing. And I think we're also well aware that in recent times we've seen various levels of flooding events in that part of Stanley and into the area where the residences are. And that's not going to decrease, that's more likely to increase. And I'm wondering, is council or in a position, or should we be looking at, or at least discussing or investigating, increasing the capacity of stormwater provision through that part of Stanley so that we don't have to say no to new developments? It's obviously a great place to develop, but realistically, if we're in this position now, it's it's going to be very hard for us to be approving any applications down the line on the same basis. So would council consider the upgrade of stormwater provision in Stanley, or at least in that part, so that we can encourage development?
Point of order, Mr Mayor. I don't wish to stand and argue and
That's
beat.
all right.
And has an ex towards you, Councillor Dabner. What you've just raised is another matter that we've got to deal with elsewhere.
Agreed.
We are dealing tonight with the planning scheme as it sits with this block. You've added another one in there,
Yep, fair point.
which is inappropriate at this point in time.
Understood.
Thanks, Councillor
Withdrawn.
Thanks, Mr Councillor Abbott. Don't disagree with you, but also
No, that's all right.
Oldacre's point is quite correct. Any further debate? For or against? Not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, councillors. 6.2. Councillor Pilkington will vacate for us.
Mr Mayor, before you start, so I just clear the air. I work for AW, do a bit of work for AWN at the Smithton Sale Yards. Should I be required to be out because the proponent of these eco cabs owns those sale yards?
I think that to be on the safe side, Councillor
You would
Oldacre,
think.
should.
Thanks, Councillor Oldacre. Appreciate it.
I wouldn't have left, Johnny.
You can't walk. Thank you, Councillor Oldacre. Right, George.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just bear with me for 1 second. Might stop halfway through. Okay. So the second application before you is for the construction of 8 eco cabins and a common room on land located, well, it's addressed on the property system as Buckby's Road, West Montague, but it's located off Little Harkness Road, West Montague. The application proposes to construct the 8 eco cabins on the site on the south-western side of Little Harkness Road. The property itself is quite large, at around 1,300 hectares. This particular proposal is for a small portion of the south-western end of the site. The proposal triggers six discretions within the scheme. 4 of those discretions relate to the use within the rural zone. So the use is categorised into the visitor accommodation use class, which has a discretionary status within the zone. The remaining discretions relate to the design and layout of parking areas, and also to clearance within a priority vegetation area. During the advertising period of the application, 5 representations were received. There were 2 from Forico, who operate forestry operations to the east of the site, and who also operate the quarry that's located on the same site as well. The remaining representations were from landowners as well as ACEN, who are the proponents of the Jims Plain wind farm. The assessment concluded that all of the performance criteria have been satisfied by the proposed visitor accommodation development. The key issues that were raised by within the representations, particularly by landowners and ACEN, related to potential conflict of the visitor accommodation use with the wind farm that's been approved. The planning scheme, in summary, doesn't provide any protections to use or development that has been issued a planning permit, unless that planning permit has effectively been substantially commenced or is in operation. In that regard, visitor accommodation isn't identified as a sensitive use, so it's not subject to the attenuation code of the planning scheme. And the use standards within the rural zone direct our attention to impacts on existing uses as opposed to approved uses. On that basis, the presence of the visitor accommodation, well, the wind farm permit and the visitor accommodation permit don't really talk to each other in terms of the planning scheme, and there's a bit of a void within the assessment. As I've highlighted, the assessment within the report has concluded that on balance, visitor accommodation use satisfies all use provisions within the zone, as well as the parking requirements and the native vegetation requirements. Just to touch on the native vegetation and the priority vegetation area, which is in the Natural Assets Code, the application was provided with or accompanied by a natural assets or natural values report or assessment. That assessment concluded that the proposed vegetation clearance wouldn't have any impact on what's called priority vegetation. It also included a list of recommendations relating to management of the development, including weed control and so forth, and a condition has been recommended that the recommendations of that report be adhered to as well. So I will hand it back over to you, Mr. Mayor, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, George. Questions? Yes? No? Councillor Flowers looked like he was going to ask a question. You don't have to stand here, mate.
With the sustainable for the wind farm, what they've spent $5 million or $7 million, I've heard today, on doing their studies and getting everything up to burn approved. It's been approved, so wouldn't that be a pretty good start?
Dates within here, it's got nothing to do with it.
Was it?
States within this.
Let George answer, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Councillor Flowers. With respect to substantial commencement, it's a term that's written into the Land Use Planning Approvals Act. It's not a defined term. Ultimately, it's a judgment call for a planner in assessing whether or not they consider that, or a planning authority to consider whether or not they believe a permit's been substantially commenced. Probably a distinction with the point that you've made is that there's two parts to effectively a planning permit. We've got all of the work involved with putting an application together and then submitting that application and then working through the process to ultimately get approval. That's it. Once the planning permit's been approved, that's the point at which the substantial commencement term comes into play. So we wouldn't be able to consider all of the money that's been spent and the time and resources and so forth to get the permit as substantially commencing the permit. And the reason for that is because all of that, all of the time and expenditure has occurred without a permit being in place. There may be a different case if there was work done to survey areas. If some physical work had been done, or there had been some surveying or some land clearance and things like that. Once the permit's been issued, there's an ability to consider that. But all of the expenditure and time and resources that have occurred up to the permit being issued, we can't. That doesn't roll over to substantial commencement.
Thanks, George. George, what if council went against your recommendation? What consequences may flow from that?
Look, the consequence would be that the application is discretionary, first and foremost. So it could be that council forms an alternative view on the one that's been put forward and come up with some refusal grounds based on the discretionary components. So that's certainly an option. In terms of the consequence, it would be up to the applicant to appeal council's decision to refuse. From that point, it would become, it obviously moves into the sphere of the tribunal. There would be potential costs involved with respect to defending that position. Now, there are several ways in which an appeal can head and lead, but if council were to, if for example the application was to go through to a full hearing on the basis that it was refused, council would need to, would likely need to engage a planning solicitor, and they would also assist with trying to engage and the other experts, whether they're planning or experts on other grounds of the refusals, to defend that position. So the ultimate risk is that there is an element of cost involved with that to defend council's position on the refusal. I would say that equally, if this is approved, then one of the representors appeal the decision, then council would still be in a position where they need to defend their decision. So it's 50-50, but certainly there's an element of cost, and there's an added level of risk when you do go against officer recommendation. But in saying that, if any appeal occurs, whether it's with aldermen going in favour of a decision or going against a decision, there's always going to be an inherent cost risk, which is part of a planning authority. It's the nature of the planning authority.
Yep. Thanks, George. Appreciate that. Is there any other questions? Right, so we have a report in front of us recommending approval of the eco cabins. Have we a mover? As there's no mover, it must lapse. So therefore, it's not approved.
It's what? It's defeated.
It's not approved, yeah. There's no mover. I have no mover. So it can't, it lapses. The wording in it?
Yes, if nobody moves it, then the motion can't be voted on, and therefore it lapses. And I'm not quite sure what the consequences of that are, but it may be a deemed refusal.
Right, should we have more discussion about that?
Sorry, George, you got something?
I can, if you'd like, I can, if I'm asked the question, I can shed some light.
Consider the question asked.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if a decision's not made, then council, and I'm not 100% certain when this application, there's been an extension of time that's been granted, and I believe it's sometime shortly after this meeting, whether it's today or tomorrow.
It's tomorrow, I think.
It should be, but it most likely be tomorrow. If council doesn't make a decision, they do run the risk of it being deemed approved, which is Section 59 of the Land Use Planning Approvals Act. The risk with that is that council, it's effectively an automatic costs position. So if council make a decision, they're not automatically required to pay costs if there is an appeal. If council fails to make a decision, then there is a guaranteed cost risk to it if it's appealed. So effectively a decision of some description would need to be made in order to avoid a Section 59 appeal. And effectively a Section 59 appeal is a bad situation for council to be in because of the cost risk.
Through you, Mr Mayor, we've more or less got to make a decision whether it fails or not.
That's how I'm reading it.
Yeah, that's what I'm reading, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, the decision could be for refusal, which I think under the procedures there'd need to be an alternative motion. I'm sure the General Manager can assist with that, or alternatively it could be approving this recommendation. But either way, Council is best to make a decision tonight to avoid a 59, a deemed approval, which is, as I said, of more risk to Council not to make a decision at all, whether that's for approval or refusal.
Thanks, George, appreciate that.
That's okay, thank you.
So,
Someone's got to move it.
someone did. Thank you, Councillor Collins.
I'll second it.
Seconded, Councillor Flowers. So we now have a motion that we can debate. Councillor Collins, do you wish to say anything?
Stand up.
Not in the planning, no.
Okay.
Not in the planning.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I actually think it's a very difficult situation for all of us in where we're at. We try and make the best decisions possible based on the rules that we're giving and the advice that we're given from these people that are experts and that know more about it than us. Given the advice that we have been told that it was probably, it passed all criteria, I think to be safe we almost need to agree with the experts that have done all the research on this and back them up from what they've given us, because we don't know more than what they know, and it is a difficult situation. As it's been said, it could be 50-50. We don't know which way it's going to go, but the safest way would be to go with the advice we've been given, I'd say.
Thanks, Councillor Collins. Councillor Flowers, do you wish to speak?
The size of the block is huge. If they're put anywhere but where they are, right beside the boundary, right beside where they propose to build these wind farms, I couldn't see an issue really, but I don't know why they just can't move them further away. Like, it's, what'd you say, 1,300 hectares or acres or something?
1,300 hectares.
Yeah, well, it's a huge block, and it's just going to cause chaos.
I think that's the best access to where the road goes to,
Yeah, I don't know. But
rather than trying to bash down a whole bit of the
Let's
vegetation.
just debate properly, not close to.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, that's just, yeah, I just seem to, it's a huge block. I don't know why they can't move it into a different position. Yeah, other than that, I agree with it totally, but not where it is really.
Further, I think Councillor Popowski looked like it, and I think Councillor Davin wishes to speak.
Good. Thanks, Mr Mayor. I would like to list 6 points that I'd like to make to fellow planners and why I won't be supporting this motion. The first one is in the assessment, and I haven't seen an Aboriginal heritage assessment. It's not been forwarded with the DA. Number 2, reference to whether 8 ego lodges with common room is a sensitive area or not is questionable. The need for determination and needs determination, as it is not referenced in the planning scheme. So what I'm saying there is there's no reference to what is a sensitive area or not. So that's another reason that I haven't got a clear clarification. The ego lodges in common room would need to be serviced daily, therefore considered to be as a sensitive area, which would then require separation of 1.8 kilometres from the proposed wind towers. So if it is a sensitive area, it's legally to be 1.8 kilometres away. That's the third reason why I oppose is, although an on-site working quarry is on the same lot, there is no mention of blasting exclusion zone or reference to a working quarry in respect to dust, noise and transport, especially if leased to a different operator. That's my third point, why I can't support the recommendation. The fourth point I'd like to make is the DA does not reference any assessment or mitigation to the disturbance of native habitat. The fifth reference is made to the fact that the neighbouring property is a working forest. determined by the Forest Practices Act, and the development site has a private forest practices listing. The PFT does not list visitor accommodation as to be compatible with forestry operations. Another reason for refusal. The sixth and final one that I'd like to bring to the attention of the fellow planners is the planning scheme does not define what is considered to be substantial rework, and one could accept that documentation and assessments with associated costs would be reasonable pre-work, and that needs determination away from here. So they're the 6 points I'd like to make in not supporting the motion or recommendation.
Thanks, Councillor Foskey. Councillor Dabney, you had to speak, wish to speak?
Yeah, I'll also be opposing the recommendation. Not because I have a problem with the development, it's a solid application and the planner's done a lot of good work on it as well. Now, I appreciate not everyone's necessarily the stickler for detail and facts that I might be showing myself to be. However, the reason I'm opposing is because there are two terms, I guess, used in the application, and if this was a contract, I wouldn't sign it without fully comprehending exactly what they are and what they mean. The first of those is existing use. Now, obviously, it's all been presented that there is no existing use next door, therefore there's no need to take those issues into account. The existing use is inextricably tied to the term substantial commencement of work. Now, I've put a lot of effort into trying to get an actual definition of what that actually means in respect to the planning scheme. It's my understanding it's a highly subjective expression and very difficult to say what isn't or isn't considered substantial. Now, just to clarify that point, I'm going to refer to a 2023 ruling of the Supreme Court of Tasmania, which is in the case of the Tarkine National Coalition Incorporated versus the EPA and Venture Minerals, who challenged this term around substantial commencement of work regarding a proposed mine which had very little work done. I think the permit was up or coming up, and anyway, they spent quite some time on talking about this, and in the ruling for that case, they reference another case, which is a council versus a company. Now, the expression, and I'm reading directly from the judgment, the expression substantially commenced is not altogether clear and precise. Sometimes the use of the word substantially has the effect of requiring a comparison to be made between a part and the whole, and this may well be so, for example, when the phrase substantially completed is used. However, to say that work has been substantially commenced does not, in the natural meaning of those words, suggest that what has been done forms a large proportion of the whole work. Something can be substantially commenced although it has not been substantially completed. For example, if in the case of a large city building, work had been done that was in itself very extensive and costly, it would accord with ordinary usage to say that work had been substantially commenced, although what work had been done formed only a small proportion of the whole work. Now, so what actually has been done? I'm a big believer in going straight to the horse, so I rang ACEN and asked them, well, what have you done? Now, they've sent me a long list of... Now, obviously, that project forms part of a transmission and Robbins Island project, and it gets hard to define, but effectively of the total 16.2 million, about 5 to 7 has gone towards the Jims Plain project, but as George rightly pointed out, how much of that comes as forming part of the permit and how much has come after is a matter for debate, but I guess that's the entire point of what I'm saying here. It's a matter of debate what substantially commenced is, and I can't necessarily, in good conscience, say that there is no existing use and substantial commencement has not occurred because, frankly, I don't think there's anyone here in this room, at least, or present in some way, who can make that ruling. That is a matter for an authority higher than all of us. So that's the first point. The second point is our response to ACEN regarding the term sensitive receptor. That was another two little word thing that just flagged with me. I didn't understand what a sensitive receptor was, so I've been on a mission to find out for quite some time, as you know. So I rang the EPA. I thought, well, they'll know. They don't provide external advice to individuals such as myself, but they did refer to me to a bloke called Phil Roberts, who was their noise expert until very recently, and he's moved on to another department. He was more than happy to chat about what exactly is a sensitive receptor in returns to visitor accommodation, which we have defined as not being a sensitive receptor. Now, we talked for quite some time, and he read a lot of things in that time while we chatted. And visitor accommodation isn't specifically defined as a sensitive receptor. Other things are hospitals, residences, those things are, but the fact that visitor accommodation isn't mentioned doesn't automatically mean that it's not. And so his summary, now it's not legal advice, but I would consider it expert opinion in this case, is that it is not for a council to decide. It would need to go to a court, a judge and lawyers to thrash out exactly what visitor accommodation and sensitive receptors have to do with one another. Now, I will point out I'm probably for the development in I don't have a dog on either side of the literal fence in this thing, but I do believe in making completely informed decisions, and in this particular instance, there are two pretty critical elements of this to me that I don't feel informed about, and therefore I can't blindly agree with it without actually knowing, and for that reason I'm opposing this application, unfortunately.
Thanks, Councillor Zabner. Any others wish to speak? Before I give Councillor Collins a chance to sum up if she wishes, I will be supporting. I am uncomfortable in certain areas, but in a lot of thought I put into it is the areas that I'm uncomfortable with I don't believe fit within the remit that we've got to work with. So I will be supporting along those lines. Councillor Collins, did you want to sum up?
I'd just reiterate what you've said in those areas. I don't think we're the experts in those areas. I know there are grey areas there, but this is what a lot of planning has been based on over the years, and we must go with it as far as I'm concerned, because that is what we've been advised to do, and the advice comes from these people that are well studied in what they're doing, and they know a lot more about it than us. So I think we need to support the information we've been given.
Thank you for your debate, councillors. Informed work, well done. So I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Those against?
Aye.
3-3, the motion fails. Thank you, George. Thank you. Now, can we get our two councillors in, please, Rachel?
Matt, do you want a copy of...
I'll grab that.
Last time someone was out that long, he went home. The last time someone was out that long, he went home. Yeah. The X-Men. Did he get rid of that?
Well, it was up there.
Sorry, gentlemen, it took a little while.
Motion failed.
Right, we're up to
Item 7.
item 7, matters raised by councillors. 7.1, 7.2.1. There's a question from Councillor Poposky with an officer's response there.
Yes, I'd like to make a comment, thanks.
Yes, certainly, Councillor Poposky.
What is it, 7.2?
7.2.1.
Yeah.
I've read the response, the officer's response, which I feel sadly to say I'm disappointed with. The response rightly points out the need for signage, but why is the time delay when it is required now and the attributes are not going to be changed in their location? It's not a big impost on council to put some signs on to go to these attributes as I've raised in the question, and I think they could be moved, and I point out that in our new planning that some may need to be moved their location, but I still feel that we need something in the intermediate time for the upcoming, for our tourists in the upcoming area. So I just still can't like I said, I'm disappointed. A solution may well be, if we talk to the tourist manager, that they may well be able to create a mud map to answer any inquiries that would direct people to those attributes that I've put down there. Because I believe people come to Smithton and they want to look around, and we've got some wonderful attributes. A lot of people are interested in Anzac Park. We've got the Memorial Heritage Tree. We've got the Coronation Tree. We've got Swirl. We've got a wonderful waterfront down at the wharf. These are areas that we want our visitors to go to. So if we could talk to the tourism manager and see if, in the interim, if we can't get signage up to probably try to make a mud map.
Thanks, Councillor Popowski. We'll take that as a question without notice and take it on notice.
I'll certainly talk to the tourism
Yep.
manager.
So we'll do. Thanks, Councillor Popowski. We'll take that as a question without notice. So.
I didn't think there was any question.
Well, we've got to put it in there somewhere. It was a bit of a...
That's all right, thank you.
Right, now, further questions without notice. Is the councillors got any questions without notice? If not, we will move on to 8.1 was a notice of motion put forward. Councillor Pilkington has decided to withdraw the motion and lay it on the table at this point in time until such time as all the appeals in relation to, that are going on at the moment in relation to Robbins Island have been completed. So the notice of motion is therefore withdrawn. 9.1, finances.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, before you we have the financial reports for the period ended 31st of August. On to page 489. We've received 4 applications for first homeowners grant, with 4 in total for this year so far, which is pleasing. We have the closing funds available for the area management committees. Also on to page 490, we currently have a comprehensive result or a profit and loss of 7.6 million compared to our budget at 8.1 for the period. Down below on note 2 and 3, we've yet to receive, we're slightly under budget compared to the profiled budget at the end of August. We had budgeted to receive a first instalment of the financial assistance grant, which hasn't turned up yet. And also the Port Ladder usage charges for August were also invoiced on the September 1st, so that's thrown the figures out a little bit. In terms of the financial position, we've currently got total equity of 271.3 million. That was on 491. On 492, we currently had cash at the end of the period of 22.4 million. In terms of rates, we have page 493, proportion uncollected is 86.19, so 0.04% under where we were at the same time last year, which is pleasing. We also have debtors, sundry debtors, so amounts owed to council of a little over $1 million, which is very high compared to 335 at the same time last year, which the notes below explain those, that we've got some charges to the Department of State Growth for some bridge replacements there, which we've invoiced out, and also some resource sharing billing, also for the workforce planning study and resource sharing as well too there. So over the page onto 494, we've got our split of cash and investments breakup and the percentages there, which are much higher than they were this time last year, which is good for our budgeting purposes. We received, I think it was about nearly $400,000 extra last financial year compared to what we budgeted. We've also included a service area breakdown. So this is the second month that we've prepared this sort of extended report. This is on page 495. So it's just revenue expenses per operational area. Each month we'll try to add some more information to that. and hopefully get it to a point where it's got some traffic lights and things like that to show you how we're going in each of those areas each month. So on page 497 we have the cash and investments comparison as well. In terms of our 30th of June 23 audit, we've had our on-site audit in August, and Crowe are still working through that process, and all looks to be okay at this point in time, and we're hoping for a sign-off on that next Thursday. So I'll present the report for Council's consideration, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Rachel. Any questions?
Yep. Just got
Councillor
one.
Debney?
On 493, the £500,000 that Department of State Growth owes for the bridge work, how is that recently invoiced stuff, or has that been out for a while, or?
That's included in note 1, so that's only 30 days. So
Oh, is that
that's
all?
only just
It's fresh,
passed.
right, okay,
Yep.
that's right.
Councillor Foskey?
I'm a bit confused. Can you go back to 490 and tell me the difference between the headings actual and budget, year-to-date 23-23, and the annual budget and annual interim? Can you explain what
So
we're trying to...
Actual year-to-date
Yes.
is July and August.
Yes.
Actual year-to-date, or budget year-to-date, that's what was predicted
In that period
in
of
that
time.
period of time. So that's what we're explaining the differences between, because we thought, so in that first column where it's got grants of 25,000, but we've actually budgeted 980, it was because I thought the first financial assistance grant would have come in by now at the end of August, and it hasn't, so it's not coming in until September. So, but then you've got the full year budget it's got annual budget 2023, that's actually the full year budget. So that's why this was a recommendation from the audit panel to present the financials this way.
So just slow me down there a bit.
Yep.
Annual budget in the last two columns, 23, what's the difference between that and annual interim? I just didn't quite catch it all.
Okay, so, yeah, the actual, the first three columns actually should say, the first actual three columns should say 24.
Is what?
The first three columns actually should say 24.
23, 24.
23, 24, that's where we're getting confused. So the annual interim 23 is actually correct. The first 23, 23 and 23 in the first of those columns should actually say 24. Yep.
I've got to wake up early to beat you, bro.
You didn't get the hesitation out of the Councillor
Yeah,
Foskey.
no, that's good.
The other one was
Yep.
15,000 in borrowing costs. What are we borrowing to incur $15,833 in borrowing costs?
Through you, Mr Mayor, that's actually, it's not a loan, it's actually what's called a right of use asset. So this is under accounting standards. So we have to account, so we have one right of use asset, which is we don't own, but we use it to do our business with, which sounds actually really bad because it's a toilet block. So actually over in Stanley at the...
Rec Centre.
No, not the rec centre, at the church, beside the Discovery Museum. There's actually a block of toilets at the back there. We actually don't own that land, we lease that land. So that land under there is actually a right of use asset for that. So we have to account for that as if we had borrowed the funds to purchase that property. So basically that's what the accounting standard requires us to do. Yep. So it's quite confusing, and it's taken me a long time to get my head around it as well. So you see over the page on the balance sheet, there's actually under current liabilities there's one there for lease liabilities, and then there's one down further for right of use assets. So it's a whole big thing wound into lots of stuff, which is very confusing. So, but yeah, that's basically what it is. So it's not a loan, it's actually sort of like an opportunity cost of us having that piece of land with a toilet on it. So, yeah.
I believe you said this, wouldn't
I'll tell you what, that's one of the hardest things I've had to get my head around, I tell you.
Yeah.
No,
Thank you.
Thank you, yeah.
Further questions? If not, could I have a move that the financials be accepted, please? Councillor Flowers, Councillor Collins seconded. Don't think we need any debate. I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
No.
Against? Carried.
And I'll get those dates fixed, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Rachel. 9.2, financial request, General Manager.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. In the absence of the Communities Manager, I'll take the next few reports. This one is a request for financial assistance for two people who grew up in the area who've reached or been selected for a national level competition, and this is consistent with previous practice at this council. So I commend the report for council to decide whether to provide some funding or not.
Questions to the General Manager? Not, is there a mover?
Just a question, was there a figure that we thought would be what's the word, that we would be...
Provided?
Yes. It says $500
in there.
before. Is that what we're
That's
considering?
what we're proposing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Now, we'll go back. I had a mover, Councillor
Move that
Dabner,
one.
and Deputy Mayor. Wish to speak, Councillor Dabner?
No, I think it's a wonderful thing. These guys are doing amazing things in their sport, and I'm quite proud to offer support to them.
Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, same. I reiterate what Councillor Dabner said,
Yeah.
and knowing these two boys and the way they represent not only their community but now on a larger scale their country, and the fact that I taught both of them, I'm very proud of them, and I think it's wonderful that we have an opportunity to
I
support
wouldn't say too much more.
to support these kinds of sports people.
Any further comment or debate?
Yes, Mr Mayor, this is consistent with what was agreed to in the policy of supporting our young people going into national teams, and they are doing a wonderful job, and they're two great young boys.
Thanks, Councillor Oldacre. No further debate? Councillor Collins?
No, I was just going to say, do we think that that's enough? It's very, the cost of travelling and staying and all that sort of thing. I don't know how much they're supported from other means. Just a question.
It's been the amount
Okay.
in recent times.
Yep, that's fine then. I'm happy with that, but it's great that we do support them.
Okay. I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, councillors. General Manager again, the Park Centre floor repairs.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. This has been discussed at two workshops. The investigations of the floor have discovered a need for urgent repairs, and in terms of the weakness of the floor joints and a mould problem as well. So the two current users of the centre were notified immediately and have identified interim places to go, and now officers have identified projects where the funding can be drawn from in order to avoid a simple budget amendment and therefore an increase in the deficit. So you have the choice before you there to defer some work at the Smithton Hockey Centre, which we understand is not immediately urgent, to reallocate some funding and to reallocate part funding from the Anzac Park plan, which would then be reimbursed from a reserve, which would add up to the total required. So I commend the report to Council.
Thanks. Gentlemen, any questions? Yes, Pilkington.
Are the tenants planning to return to the building as soon as...
That's our current understanding, yes.
No further questions? The mover.
I'll move.
Thanks, Councillor Algers. Seconded, Councillor Flowers. Any debate?
I don't think there's any need for a debate. We've had two goes of two workshops.
Okay.
Well, we've got to do it, otherwise it's just going to fall down.
Yep.
That's right. Yeah.
All right, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Community grants, round one. General Manager again.
Yes, councillors, again, you discussed this at the last workshop. There were 7 applications in total, and you recommended 6 be brought forward to you for adoption, acceptance. So I commend the report to council.
We workshopped them. Is there any questions?
So moved.
Thanks, Councillor Oldacre. Seconded, Deputy Mayor. Any debate? I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Legat motions, general meeting motions, General Manager again.
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor. There are 4 motions that have been submitted for the general meeting on the 1st of November, 2 from Kingsborough Council, 1 from Breakaday and 1 from Clarence City. The first from Kingborough explains that they have developed a diversity and inclusion statement, and they are asking councils to consider developing and adopting similar statements across Tasmania. The second from Kingsborough explains the current situation with regard to road line marking responsibilities, and is asking Legat to lobby the state government to clarify whose responsibility it is and to increase funding. The third motion asks Legat to lobby the state government to increase Parks and Wildlife and Crown Land Services resourcing. And the final one from Clarence, this is not about lobbying state. They're asking Legat to convene a reference group to look into the 42-day planning application timeframe to understand if that's actually realistic and achievable. So I
Okay,
leave that for discussion.
right, now we might have a bit of debate on a couple of these, but is there a mover?
I'll move that.
Thanks, Councillor Dabner. Seconder? Deputy Mayor, thank you. Councillor Dabner.
Give me 1 second. Now, the inclusion statement.
Yep, we're back to standing up too.
Sorry, I apologise. Now I'll reduce that. Now, it's more of a question, I guess, than anything. The diversity and inclusion statement, is that something we've ever thought about here?
Not in my
Or
time.
felt we had a need to think about here?
Not in my time.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'm not aware of any request or discussion.
I understand what they're trying to achieve, and it says in the document further down that they want to raise awareness of neurodiversity and whatnot amongst staff and encourage an inclusive environment. I'm wondering if we feel that that is something as a member of LGAT we actually have a need to be a part of, and it's a bit of an open question, I guess, but that's just something I'm wondering whether we need to support or not, which is probably more driven from staff opinion than what we think.
Big point. Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, my question is on the same point, that should really another council be telling other councils what they need to adopt, and, we have our own staff that can come up with those kinds of plans and put things into place, so I'm not really sure that any council should be just dictating what other councils should be doing.
Thank you. You've heard of what? You got something? Come on, Councillor Hardacre, you're itching.
Are we going to vote on each individual?
Yeah, what
Yeah.
I'll do,
Yeah.
we'll have to, we'll
They're
go
all
around
separate.
individually so that we can do it. Councillor Hardacre?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This first one is I don't think that we've ever been asked for it, and I don't think we need to be worrying about it. Have enough things to worry about.
Yes, Councillor
Yeah,
Dolan?
through you, Mr Mayor. Basically, backing up what John has to say, I think the area of Circular Head does a very good job of this type of thing with their staff and in many different areas, especially council, so I don't really think we need to adopt anybody else's rules and regulations.
Anyone else further? If not, we might just go round them individually and get a nod so that I know how to vote. And I'm with basically everyone there as far as the first one goes, is that whilst I concur completely with their sentiments, I'm not sure if a broad statement across every council in Tasmania is required, and every council can make their position. Right, the first one is that diversity inclusion statement. voting yes or no. Those
No.
to say yes,
No.
those to say no. So we're no on that one. The second one is the
Line marking.
road line marking responsibilities.
So we do all our own, that's done by council, all on our roads?
No. State go.
Sorry, James, yes,
Yeah,
certainly.
through Mr
Yeah.
Mayor. The line marking on council roads is, my understanding, it's council's responsibility. However, the Department of State Growth, they do have a funding program which is allocated across the state. It's unclear as to how they allocate that funding, so we're primarily responsible for it, but we get assisted in the funding.
So, in effect, Mr Mayor, is probably the motion should read it. How can we obtain those funds, access to some of those funds, to do that? What's got to be the course of action for that to happen, rather than just be, saying, well, we need it. You need to have a reason if you're going to want to take some funds off somebody to use it. I think you need to be asking ourselves, and you will probably have to judge that on the day of the motion, what the debate's like around the table. But my view is that we need to be asking, well, if you're responsible for the road marking, how can we access some of those funds?
Which is, I agree, Councillor Oldacre, which is, I'm reading that motion as that
Yeah.
type of thing, is to get Legat to lobby for that.
Doesn't quite say that.
No, but I take your point, and we'll judge it, if everyone's happy, on the day of what comes around. Councillor Popovsky?
I support the motion that's been put forward, because I can give you a living example where I put a customer service request in 2 years ago, and the officer's response is, we've raised this with the state government, who are responsible, and they haven't done that, and it's a real safety issue. So it's a need to have.
Could we shape the motion so it is the way we want to do it?
You have to amend it, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
Make it-
but could you amend them?
Yeah, they can
So-
amend.
Yeah, but if we were to send Jared off with what,
Yeah, if we're going to have a debate across the table, someone needs to move a motion that we go into committee.
I've moved the motion. Going to
Thanks, Councillor Flowers, a seconder. Councillor Pilkington, those in favour?
Aye.
It's carried. Right, now go.
well, I think the sentiment of the motion's good, it's just not directing us, it's not direct to what we think is good about it. So if we shaped the motion the way we thought was good and moved it as an amendment, or maybe got the agreement of Kingborough prior to it to amend their motion.
So what would the suggestion be? Because that's just saying, the motion seeks to lobby the government on behalf of all the councils to have the road marking responsibility legislated, so rather than just say it's actually legislated, and to consider developing and adopting similar,
And
read the right
additional
one,
funding.
and additional funding provided by the state government, the council's trying to take that work. I think it covers it.
Yeah, righto.
I do too.
If you really read it.
I think it covers where we want to be. I think we all agree that we want to be there,
Yeah.
but I think it covers it.
It does cover it, it's just, its clarity didn't draw us to agree with it straight away.
Yeah.
So if we get older and a bit so that it did, and it probably other councils are thinking the same way, the sentiment's good.
But have we got it's not our motion.
No.
No, we can
amend it.
We can
We
amend
can amend it, can
but-
we? Yeah, right.
But we'll need to know precisely what we want.
I don't think it's too bad as
Right.
it states, my opinion.
Through you, Mr.
Okay.
Mayor.
All right, so a yes on that one?
Yep.
Yep.
And then we'll judge if we've got to do something quick and live with it. And the other one was the Parks and Wildlife Ground Services review of resourcing. Once again, that's a Legat lobby in that.
Well, all that motion is what we put up over the years before. It's exactly the same motion we put up.
Yep,
To lobby parks to put more money into,
or more government money into parks.
more money
This
And
is
for
a-
example, we have a number of roads that our community uses that parks own,
Yep.
right? And some of those roads at different times are appalling, as councillor Foskey will adhere to.
And not only roads,
This one's about, are available to assess applications and deal with inquiries.
Oh,
So it's
sorry.
not about road,
No, it's
roads, it's resourcing in terms of administration staff.
which one was I making up on you then?
Third one.
the third one.
Third one, the
But
parks
it's
and
not
wildlife.
about
Oh,
roads, it's not about
yeah, so-
maintaining roads, it's about...
So the Legat lobby the Tasmanian Government to undertake a review of the administrative activities of
Sorry?
Tasmanian Parks and Wildlife and Crown Land. So, I say here, with us as staff, if we've got, if you wanted to do something with one of the Crown properties or whatever, it could take 2 years
Yeah.
for us to actually get through that process.
Yep.
So this is what this is saying, is to do a review,
Yep.
review of the admin
Takes
of
time.
Parks and Wildlife and Crown to make sure that we can get applications processed and things like that.
Sorry, councillors, my mistake.
Can't sack them all, eh?
So, I don't know whether that'll do any good, but I can't see any harm in supporting
No, I
it.
reckon from
I'd support
through
it.
Mr Mayor, through a staffing point of view, it'd be a
Good if something happened.
Yep. Definitely.
So that's
As
a
long as
yes.
they improved it and didn't review it.
And the other one, sorry, was the 42-day planning application timeframe. James, have you got a comment as far as, I know you're not a planner, but as far as staffing stuff goes there?
Through you, Mr Mayor, nothing to really add there.
It's just asking Legat
For a
to
reference
convene a reference group.
So, yeah, I suppose the reference group would then
Come up
touch
with
base with some
recommendations.
ideas, so. Any harm in it?
There's
Not that I-
no harm in it.
No.
But if they only, depending on what the makeup of that committee would be, we'd want to make sure that this end of the coast is represented and they're not just a committee set up out of Metropolitan, Hobart and Launceston.
Yeah, we can talk to that. We can talk to that, all parts of the state and all sizes of councils are represented on that. Something along those lines? Yep, certainly. Okay, so, sorry,
I might add, Mr Mayor, otherwise if we don't get that in there, we'll just get
could
over
end-
the top of it.
you could end up with completely city-focused stuff, yes?
We've no
I
idea
agree.
what happens in the country.
Yep, I agree. Right, now I need to go back into,
You need to come out of committee.
come out of committee, and I need a mover to come out of committee. Thanks, councillor Pilkington. Seconded, councillor Flowers. Put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Now, did we have a move and a second? I think we did, didn't we, on that?
Yes.
We did? Okay, no further debate. I think the general manager's got the notes on where we are at there. I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. 9.6, our state election policies. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you, Council has workshopped on a number of occasions some priorities in preparation for whichever election that comes next, and these are attached to the document. As it happens, I've already been asked by Gavin Pearce's office whether we have a list of priorities, so I've given him the draft, and I commend the report to Council.
Any questions?
The only question I've got is the heavy vehicle tax won't be federal.
This is for either.
For either it is.
Yeah, I understand that, but we wouldn't raise that as being a federal issue.
No, we wouldn't, and I've clearly said that this is a number of priorities that will fit different levels of government.
Okay. Mover.
Can I just
Yep.
add something? I'm happy to move it. I'm happy to move it. But I'm just wondering if we can add the Stanley Master Plan for the redevelopment of Church Street into this.
So you'll move the report with the addition of the Stanley Master Plan.
Yeah, because to get that moving, we're going to need some
Yep.
extra funds.
You don't ask, you don't get.
That's right.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the total cost of that project implementation is between 5 and 7 million, the total cost, so it would be
Along
a
the term
useful
plan.
ask to
Yep.
add to the list.
Seconded to that then?
Indeed.
Councillor Collins. Debate? Deputy Mayor?
No, that's all I wanted to say. I just feel that should be added.
Councillor Collins?
No, I think it's a great idea, very well brought up, so I'll support it, yeah. Thanks.
Round the table, Councillor Kokoski?
I don't think, I'm not going to support it if that's the case, put that one in, because we haven't prioritised which we want to take as the first step, whether it be the upgrade of the CBD or the Church Street upgrade. And I don't think it's right to put it into this here until we come up with an equal funded plan and our priority.
Okay, thank
And
you.
our rationale for that is, and my support for one over the other, we've got to look at our population density and geographic locations, so that's the reason.
Thank you. Further debate? I'll be supporting that because the Stanley Master Plan is well advanced, well down the track compared to where we are with the central business, which is also extremely important,
Already listed.
but it's further down the track, and if the election comes up quick, we might as well be in with it with some sort of chance. I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against?
Aye.
Carried. Did you get those? Thank you. Senior Manager report.
Mr Mayor,
Oh, sorry.
was we voting on then to put that, in with that, or was we voting on the whole lot?
Sorry of the whole lot. The motion
was
was
to-
that with that in there.
With that in there, yep.
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 So the motion that's been passed, and I'm willing to revisit if we need to, but the motion.
No, I was just making sure, that was all.
Yep. So the list as per on the report plus the Stanley Master Plan.
Yep.
Thank you. Senior Manager's report.
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor, the senior management report outlines a number of steps that we're making in terms of governance and digital transformation. There is a short passage on progress of charts, and I would like to commend staff for the amazing efforts they've made to grow this festival over the last 4 years. It's going really well. There's no other particular things I wish to draw to anybody's attention, so I'm happy to take questions, Mr Mayor, if there are any.
Thank you. Questions to the General Manager? I add my voice to that. Congratulations on the efforts of the charts team and what they've managed to put together. It's been quite magnificent. If there's no questions, is there someone willing to move that that report be accepted? Thanks, Councillor Collins. Seconded, Deputy Mayor. Motion, no further debate. Put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. 9.8, Stanley Caravan Park boundary consolidation. Objections? General Manager.
Through you, Mr Mayor, this report is reporting back to Council after the statutory advertising process for the boundary changes in pursuit of consolidation and subdivision. And we had 4 objections as listed in the report. The officers' comments are summarised below each objection, and I'm happy to take questions, but essentially the northern block is already part of the title, but had previously been fenced out, and the northern block is not intended to provide a new entry or exit point for patrons. It will be gated off, and that block is intended to be used primarily for storage. So there should be no risk to people living nearby's amenity. In relation to the western block, there was a little bit of misunderstanding on the part of the objector who particularly focused on that, and I accept that that was due to the map not being clear. The western parcel sits inside the existing path across that land, and so public access will be retained. So on that basis, the recommendation is that you proceed with the boundary changes. The subdivision has already been approved. I recommend the report.
Thanks, General Manager. Is there any questions before I ask for a mover? Not, is there a mover?
sorry.
Just
Through you,
Councillor
Mr Mayor. I was just, because the boundaries were so unclear, How close to the back fence is the boundary line on the northern side of the triangle that's been included?
The Western Triangle, how close
Yeah.
to the back?
There's some houses along that fence
Yep.
line there. Does that go right up to their fence line? I understand there's access gates through one.
It won't, well, we won't be blocking off rear access gates, no. So the parcel will not result in any loss of access to property.
No other questions? Is there a mover for the report?
Yes, and I'm sorry you got it, John, did you?
Councillor Oldacre, second, and Councillor Poposky. You good with second, Councillor Poposky?
Well, did you have a question?
I second it. No,
You second
no,
it?
just-
You got second.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'll move.
Thanks, Councillor Oldacre. Yes, go ahead.
This is a very unfortunate set of circumstances that we found ourselves in. There has certainly been supposedly some contracts there, and they haven't sought legal advice on some of these contracts, and that's very unfortunate. I think hasn't really nothing to do with us, but I don't think it's been handled that well, and we need to support the recommendation because in the original contracts it says he only had to give them 3 months' notice. It's my understanding, and if that's the case, he's given them 12 months' notice. Those as well. Sure.
This is just the boundaries we're talking about.
Yeah, but still, I understand what you're saying, but still the boundaries to make this adjustment is, I had forgot about the December subdivision, and it's easy enough done. We've been lobbied about the whole process, dealing not only with the boundaries, but with the whole setup as such. And that's why I raised those matters. But we have agreed to the subdivision, so therefore we have to agree to these boundaries. People will still have access to the beach, but there'll be no gates on the back end of that. So that problem's solved for those that live close by, as we just heard, and so therefore we need to support this recommendation. There'll be some people that won't be very happy, can't do much about it, but I didn't sign a contract.
Thanks, Councillor Oldacre. Councillor Poposky, you wish to speak?
Yeah, I just support the boundary adjustment and the fact that it'll tidy up the block to make it one parcel of land.
Yep, thank you. Further speakers, Councillor Flowers?
I'll be voting against it. This company, in my opinion, has treated some of the ratepayers shockingly. They've kicked them out to have gained more land, and in return we've given them more land again. So all they are is money hungry, in my opinion, and not looking after the ratepayers at all. And I don't even think they're ratepayers, but that's my opinion of the matter.
Yep, thank you. Further comment? No, I'll be supporting the motion because we've already done it. Basically, it is unfortunate. I concur with Councillor Oldacre there. A lot of this, some homework hasn't been done along the way. Sadly, not by us, but it is what it is. No further debate. I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against?
Aye.
The other one. Thank you, councillors. Annual update on resource sharing. General Manager.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Best on grounds.
Working hard tonight.
This report, through you, Mr Mayor, is an information report for council to note the resource sharing arrangement between Waratah, Wynyard and Circular Head councils has strengthened over the past year, and we are now considering what version 2.0 might look like, pending any outcomes from the Future of Local Government review. So I commend the report to council.
Thanks, General Manager. Any questions to you? Not. Is there a mover?
So move.
Councillor Oldacre, Councillor Debner. Any debate? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Now we've got minutes. we'll do all the minutes in one if we can, we'll go through them. There's minutes there from Secretary Cheddick, Stanley Town Hall and Tarkine Progress Group. Is there any questions or comments on any of those? Right, can I have a mover that the three lots of minutes as be noted, please? Deputy Mayor, Councillor Dabner. No debate, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Public correspondence, the Year 9 Christian School, 16 letters. And one outgoing, I even it up a bit, and a support letter for the Stanley Peninsula Trust there. Questions on those or comments? And I'll just add a thing, I actually went down and spoke to the class about their letters, and I thought it was easier to go and talk to them than write 16 letters.
Is there anything in particular that you found of interest out of their ideas?
Their ideas, actually, there's several of their ideas mirroring what we're doing, e.g. playgrounds, pump tracks, a lot of ideas around the use of the basketball stadium and stuff like that, some ideas of which Councillor Deputy Mayor's brought up around the safety of the school area, around that Nelson Street area there, just up there. So there was no, we want more parties type stuff. They was very sensible, really, quite well thought out letters actually. But as you can see if you look through them, there's quite some sensible, and I was able to tell them some of them we've already started work on, so, which was good.
Did you reinforce with them that the swirl is free for under 16s?
No, they didn't ask me about the swirl.
Oh, they said activities.
Sorry, Councillor Plosky, no, I did not.
Very important.
I'll take that slapping on notice. Right, so can I have a mover and second that the public correspondence be noted, please?
Before you go on, you didn't mention the National Trust letter.
Oh, I did, but yeah.
I'm extremely disappointed, which is no problems to the rest of the councillors, that's why I'm not. But how can we come across a reception of a letter like this without any discussion that we could support or not support, when I'm not saying I agree or disagree that the nut could be National Heritage listed, but it also takes into the peninsula, which I think is worth a discussion by the council, and yet we don't get any discussion. Maybe we can get we'll get some consultation later on, but just to hit us with a surprise like this is not the way I would think would be fair.
When we read that letter, it's the nut mentioned, not the peninsula. Oh, the nut and volcanic features of the Stanley Peninsula, so it's the nut.
It's not the whole peninsula, but it's fair enough.
Just the way
Through you,
it's
Mr
worded.
Mayor. I think the understanding is it's basically based on the nut, but using the, to show that the volcanic features of the peninsula support the fact that it was actually a volcano in the past. It's more to that, rather than actually trying to include the peninsula in the National Trust listing.
The peninsula will be covered under as we forward our
My point is not what they've nominated, it is the way they went about nominating without at least consulting with us, to make us aware.
Oh,
Yep, sorry, I missed your point. I'm sorry, yep, I missed the first point. In
Maybe
other words,
we
you
might
come
want-
here,
We may want to include all circulated, we haven't had a discussion.
yep, you come here before they go away. Yep, okay, point taken.
You're dreaming.
Right, so now we'll go back to a mover. Councillor Pilkington, oh no, hang on, I'll get there in a minute. Councillor Pilkington, Councillor Oldacre.
In amongst this is the correspondence that's laid on the table. At what point are we going to have some discussion about some of those things? Letters there that's come, one from the basketball, one from, just reading through it. There is some concerns about the basketball stadium. When they start making suggestions we get rid of the squash courts, I think the squash people might have some sort of say in it.
Yeah, well, these are the questions that for the kids raised. And
They're there, that we will want to have some discussion because they'll come to us for some funding to do some of these things.
they've been told that some of these things are in progress, some of these things are to be talked about, but they've not been suggested that we're going to pull the squash courts out or anything like that. So that was, there's no indication of works going forward apart from what we've already started.
There'll need to be a discussion, I see.
Absolutely, absolutely. Councillor Pilkington, you happy to move it? Thank you, can I have a second it? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I put the motion, those in favour? Aye. Against, carried. Right, so now I need a motion to consider matters in the closed meeting, or matters proposed for the closed meeting. Thanks, Councillor Oldacre. Second, not Deputy Mayor, Councillor Dabner.
Oh, take the upgrade.
Put the motion, those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried, and a motion to close the open meeting. Councillor Flowers, seconded. Councillor Collins?
Isn't there a second question time?
No.
No.
Hasn't been for quite a while.
There hasn't been for quite a while.
You're kidding me.
No, there hasn't been for quite a while.
Well, I've got some questions to ask in regards to the things that you've just discussed.
I'm sorry, there's only one question time. And there has been since last October.
Well, I had a stroke last October. I've been
No, well,
busy trying to rehabilitate myself.
Can't do nothing about that, I'm sorry.
Well, was this put out to public consultation that you were
No.
in the second lot of questions?
It's been in the thing. So we're not having a debate about it, Melissa. You can ring me tomorrow and talk to me about it if you wish.
Well, I personally want
Melissa, you can ring me tomorrow and talk to me about it if you wish. I'll put the motion that we close the meeting. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Ring me tomorrow.